Everyday Life with Guardsmares, Chapter 30. Lily Glamorspear's point of view.
Hey, Sparks, do you think you could trade me a shift next month?
Artemis hadn't come back upstairs at lunchtime. A royal engineer had taken her out for lunch instead. Apparently they'd jogged halfway around the city before realizing it was lunchtime, which meant that when she'd finally showed up at the end of her shift, Lily's only chance to make her move would be right then and there. It was the most difficult thing Lily Glamorspear had ever done. The cream-colored Pegasus looked up at her from the other end of the sofa.
Sure, what day?
Maybe it was just the horn juice screwing with her, or maybe it was some lingering effect of the mana burn, but she felt like she was sweating buckets. The sofa was going to be soaked when she got up.
The 14th. It's a Saturday, I know. I've got a kind of a private engagement that evening. Maybe you have a weekend I can trade for it afterwards?
Lily knew full well that she did. As if she was embarrassed to even ask, the unicorn grinned and awkwardly rubbed her shoulder. With a smile and a nod, Sparkshower got up from the sofa. Over at the card table, Honor was still buried deep in that huge book of hers. It was even worse having her in the room, but what else could Lily do? She had to get this done now before it's too late. Sparkshower walked over to the calendar. Time seemed to stand still as Sparkshower lifted the current page to examine the dusty roster for April.
Come on, come on, come on!
Lily glanced almost angrily over at Honor. She was still deep in that book.
Well, she'd better stay that way.
Nosy Mare ought to keep her snout out of Lily's business. Over at the calendar wall, Sparkshower let go of that month's page, and it seemed to crash down back onto the wall with a heavy thud, like thunder in the distance. She turned around incredibly slowly, and her head somehow preceded her body, staring at Lily, even as her torso and neck were still facing away. She pictured her furious, her teeth bared, wings extended, except they were leathery bat wings instead of pretty feathered ones. Artemis opened her mouth and suddenly fire shot from it. The flames reached across the room to lick at Lily's body, and she could feel the heat of them. But she was frozen in place, her muscles locked up and eyes fixed into the Pegasus's gaze. Sparkshower spoke in an unnaturally low voice, and the whole palace rumbled with each syllable.
It looks like I'm on for the 21st in the evening, same as you the week before.
The words came out so slowly that Lily struggled to make out each one, and all the while the far end of the room seemed to twist itself into a spiral. Since when was the washroom door in the ceiling?
Sure, I could do that, no problem.
Glamorspear blinked, and Sparkshower was standing immediately in front of her now. She was smiling at Lily, but then her eyelids opened wider and wider, stretching back across her brow and over across her head. Lily tried to gasp, but before she could make a sound, Artemis had peeled herself right open.
What the fuck? Somebody make it stop!
In spite of the horror of what she was witnessing, Lily felt herself smile and heard herself speak.
Thanks, Sparks, you're a pal.
All of a sudden there was a sharp pain at her left temple. She lifted up a hoof to rub it, only to find that there was something there. Glancing over sideways, she realized that it was a whole spear, sticking out of her head. It was glowing, translucent, and it was teal. It was one of hers. And there was something at the far end of it. The shaft stretched out past the couch, almost reaching the far wall, which had moved itself 100 yards away. Lily didn't dare move her head an inch, lest she knock it into something. She had to reach up and reel it in to find out what was at the end. The spear turned a rope in her hooves, and she tugged it closer and closer, bringing the far wall with her. It was something white and fluffy looking.
What is that?
Just when she'd almost gotten it close enough to take a good look, there was an unearthly crack from beside her. Corporal Bound had twisted her neck 360 degrees around and bent it over backward and away from her book. She looked at Glamorspear with two eyes and then over at Sparkshower with another pair. There was a pulsing, pumping noise coming from somewhere like the bellows of a forge. Even with a spear sticking out of her head and two comrades that seemed to have suddenly taken contortionism to a new extreme, somehow the sound was even more horrifying. It was so regular, rushing in and out in heavy throbs. The whole room seemed to beat along with it, everything getting close when it pushed out, and then back off when it drew in. She couldn't even think it was so loud. But when Corporal Bound opened her mouth, it suddenly stopped.
You know, Sparkshower? No. That's the day. No. Of the grand. Why is it suddenly so hard to breathe? Galloping. You can't breathe. Gala.
Gasping for air as if she'd been held underwater, Lily drew in a huge breath.
The man has the presence!
She needed another dose right the fuck now. Scrambling forwards, Lily flailed her hooves at the potion satchel sitting on the coffee table. In the blink of an eye, she snatched up one of the vials, popped the cork, and threw it back like a cheap shot. The cold fluid dripped down her throat, and the pain, the spear, all seemed to disappear. The room untwisted itself, and Corporal Bound turned her head back the right way again. Even Sparkshower had her body the right side out now, but she was giving Lily a look. A very angry look.
It is? Oh, Buck.
Ebonshield's point of view. Sergeant Ebonshield was so far having a first shift most enjoyable. After her little discussion with the Great Lord Anonymous, she was feeling excited. Yet what thing particularly excited her the most? The prospect of further nights enjoying the life of Metropolitan Canterlot probably ranked the highest. But she had to admit that she was also eager to see what new prospects awaited her in the service of the Royal Engineer. Who knows, perhaps he would even prove to be a reasonable fighter. There would be benefits to a new sparring partner at least. She should discuss the possibility of training with the other members of the Quaternio.
No, the Quaternion.
That was the word in the equestrian tongue. She remembered this now. Either way, they should all train together, certainly at least once or twice a month. Artemis did say that Corporal Bound regretted that before the battle at New Stirrup Bridge. Yet why had she done nothing? Did the Royal Guard not expect their VIP service ponies to conduct some maneuvers with each other? How else were they going to fight together to defend their lord or lady? They were questions for later, though they might have been answered had she attended the VIP training, although actually finishing the course was, of course, out of the question. If not for other reasons, then at least because she had better things to do. For example, to try out another nightclub tonight. Some pony last night had recommended a place called The Stables in the Street Thin near the Square Pachyderman Palace. Reportedly, this attracted a livelier crowd than the one that which she had tried last night called Tapestry. Tapestry was probably a place perfectly enjoyable on a Friday or Saturday night, but she still needed a home after sunset for the other 5 nights of the week. And since the Royal Engineer didn't seem to have taken any real offense at her suggestions, she would have the opportunity to find one. She could hear already the music pumping in her ears, smell the cider and the sweat, and feel the wonderful warm heat of so many bodies pressed together. And always the thought tantalizing that one of those bodies out there might belong to her that night. But for now, though, things were quiet. Her charge was at his desk, hunched over a stack of papers, one hand on his forehead and the other scribbling furiously away with a quill. Even here over by the door she could hear him muttering the numbers under his breath. The work must be very important. Every now and then he had to reach over to grab another sheet to refer to. No books though, just papers. And some of them were quite large, folded up like maps. He was deep in thought when there was suddenly a loud thud coming from the floor above. Instinctively her head pivoted up to try to suss out the source, but she was indistinct. Nothing had crashed through the ceiling. Some pony must have just tripped and fallen down the hallway upstairs, or perhaps accidentally knocked over a piece of furniture. She was about to dismiss the sound and settle back in when there's another boom, and what sounds like heavy hoofsteps. Squinting, she stared up once more, swiveling her ears around forward. Perhaps if she flew up, she could get a better sense of what was occurring, but that would probably disturb the Great Lord in his work. Not to mention, violate his privacy. The movable partition wall that divided the chambers in two separated off his bedchambers. But the partition, she was only about 8 hooves high, whereas the ceiling must be 30 or 40. As Ebonshield was pondering how to investigate, she started to hear the voices. 2 of them. Or, no, 3, and they were now shouting at each other quite loudly, though still not loud enough for her to make anything out.
Sounds like some ponies have an argument.
Over at his desk, the Royal Engineer had paused in his writing. He gestured up at the source of the disruption. What's up there, actually? I've never been upstairs. As a recent immigrant to the palace, with the passages identical and the layout confusing, Ebonshield had to think about that question for a moment. The answer, when she came, had her feeling enveloped in a cold shadow.
They are the rooms housing the members of your Quaternion, Great Lord.
Anonymous frowned. Really? You're lodged directly above this room?
Yes, Great Lord.
I hope nothing is wrong. So did she. Just then there was another boom, accompanied by a crash. Ebonshield snickered, and was about to say something when there was a shout from upstairs which was loud enough to be understood, even through the ceiling.
I said no making friends with a bat pony!
Inhaling deeply, Ebonshield rudely failed to look her lord in the eyes even as she addressed him.
If the Great Lord would permit my absence for but a moment, I will investigate this disturbance.
Gracefully exiting the room and shutting the door behind her, she broke into a silent but rapid flight, going straight for the staircase.
Some pony upstairs will answer for this.
With the Royal Engineer's chambers behind her, she couldn't see him pick up his quill and sharpen the instrument with his knife. As Ebonshield made for the stair, she was mostly too far away to hear the rest of the argument. For the sake of her unit, she did not hear the shouted replies that came after a few more heated but comparatively quiet exchanges.
But we don't even like Anonymous!
She certainly could not see Anonymous, the Royal Engineer of Equestria, frown as the distinct, muffled shouting continued unabated. Putting down his quill and knife, he looked up at the ceiling, furrowed his brow, and then got to his feet. This sort of reminds me about prom, all of the complaints that happened before, after, or even during. That's funny though. Anyway, let's get on to our comedic donators. Top donators are 630, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, Only One Thing, and Twinkie. Raiden, Narwhals, Black Moon Art, Pastel Skies, Austin Rollins, Crazy Color 557, Stu Hex, Sword Brother and Mordred, Abicon Library, Will, Chris, Dospo, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, RuneScyther 9852, Madman Stan, Lizzie Perkett, Drake Lovedragon, Hunter Norman, Stephen Bingham, Linega12, Sorcerer Constantine, Hud Zaza, Conver, and many more amazing people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.